Welcome back to Inside Roswell. This episode is part of our retreat series, where we're sharing different perspectives on how the city works together, plans together, and comes together to serve Roswell. Today, I'm joined by Councilwoman Sarah Beeson, Mayor Pro Tem. Sarah was elected in 2022, and so she has experience in multiple mayor and council retreats in the past. And I think that's going to give us a valuable perspective on how this process shapes decisions over time and helps with our decision-making process. I'm looking forward to talking to her about why this time together matters, what stood out, and how these discussions help guide the work ahead. So, Councilwoman Beeson, welcome. And you ready to get started?
I am. Thank you so much for having me, Mayor Roswell, and welcome to office.
Thank you so much. So, you've attended several mayor and council retreats during your time in office so far. So from an elected official's perspective, what role does the retreat like this really play in a regular council that regular council meetings just can't meet?
Right. So as you mentioned, I was originally elected in December in 2022. So it was a special election. So my first retreat was February of 2023. It's when we went to Opelika, Alabama, and got to tour the City of Auburn's public safety facility. That one was a little bit different because that was the first time I had ever been on council, so I didn't have anything to compare it to. So I was kind of thrown into that situation with no context. And at that point in time, I didn't even have a liaison role. So sitting in these sessions, you're trying to figure out, it's like drinking water through a fire hose, but I became public safety liaison for several years. It was like drinking water through a fire hose. And it was a lot of, and I'm sure from y'all's position too, being newly elected leaders, not newly elected yourself, you've obviously served in the past, but we're just within this role trying to get your bearings. And I think that's something as just a newly elected from that position, it allows you to get a context for who is who on staff. You're getting to meet with not only the deputy city administrators and the city administrator, but also those who report to them. You have senior level staff. They're recapping the last year for you, their goals, what they achieved in the past year, and then also based off of that, what they can build on that success for this coming year. So it allows the newly electeds to step into that role seamlessly. I had remember telling, I was talking to a staff member when I first came on, and I said, I could not fathom working in a role. I oversee operations for an engineering firm on private sector. I could not fathom being in a position where, you're full steam ahead, you're mission oriented, you're doing exactly as leadership requested. And then every 2 to 4 years, leadership completely changes. And you're like, just kidding, we're changing direction, we're doing something else. So I think at this point in time, it allows everyone to get that sense of alignment and get on the same page. And beyond just interactions with staff, I've known you for several years, predating your position. I've known all of the elected officials before my role on council and before their role on council. But you have some folks from the previous administration who are being folded into a new administration and being able to understand how they work together, where their priorities are, why they were elected to office and what they're trying to achieve. It gets everyone on the same page in a way. Council meeting, we can't have those long-winded open conversations. Especially when you're just trying to get through order of business. So being able to set long-term priorities, being able to set goals, being able to collaborate, but really just getting to know people in a working environment is really helpful. And it's not in a way either that I think folks are like, oh, you have to go away, it's going to be a big secret. Anybody who's worked in a large organization, you've done an offsite, right? It's great to be able to step out of your usual work environment to get out of that rut. I appreciated the location we went to the last few years, Barnsley, in the sense that it was just far enough away. And what I mean by that is it's a little over an hour. I know as somebody who works full time in addition to my role on council, you have this tendency of being like, okay, well, I'll be right back. I'm going to go to catch this one meeting. I've got this one Zoom. I have one client who's coming in for lunch. I'll be right back, because you're just close enough. Or I have kids where it's like, well, I'm going to go take them to the dentist appointment. I'll miss this one session. We block out very intentionally those 3 days to dedicate our brains, our minds, our time to being able to work on this in a way that is nonstop. It's a little intense, but it's appreciated time. I think, would you say that that was what you gathered?
We went from 7:30 in the morning to around 8 o'clock at night every day that we were there. When those that We basically ate every meal together.
Oh, yeah.
While we kind of worked, but it was also that, as you said, getting to bring in the new, getting to understand, and we have some new staff members too. Those are the kinds of conversations that I think is very difficult to have on a routine basis while you have your regular life to step, like as you said, to step out too. And you talked about the differences and how important it is. And as you said, most businesses do that, but even most governmental agencies. I remember when I first served down at the State House, they took us all to Athens for 2 days. So all 181 of us with, learning, giving us information, which it's a lot of information. As you said, from the fire hose, we were trying to give it in a way, especially new people, that we felt comfortable, enough information to ask questions, but also to know what maybe you're not yet ready to ask that question, but know where to go look for next. Do you listen differently now to staff and their reports and what their information they're giving you, even though you may have known a lot of that? Did you hear things a little differently at this retreat?
Based off of my personal experience, and again, I can't speak to anything prior to 2023, this was the first retreat that I went to, leadership retreat, that staff ran it. And being able to have staff be able to organize it at that level and have them be able to set the lens, because they're in it day to day. You and I, we come and go from the buildings, not only just week to week, but you and I are going to come and go from these buildings in cycles of years. They are the evergreen in this situation. So they're the ones who have the historical context within the organization. They understand long-term the direction that the organization's trying to go in, overarching. I really appreciate staff's commitment to public service in a way it's not showy. You never see your name on a sign, which if anybody who's ever run for office, those are expensive signs. You don't want to see your name on that sign.
After a while, you're like, please, I don't want my name on my sign anymore.
Or someone calling you, your sign's in the middle of the road, come pick it up. But they don't have it. They're not there for any sense of glory or any sense of legacy. They're in it because they truly believe in serving the public. And being able to have these senior leaders within the staff who have spent some decades in public service take their leadership, take that skill set, and take what they've experienced and be able to provide us with the context of what the state of the city is really internally before we as elected officials interpret that and be able to communicate it outwardly, I think was really helpful. It wasn't a whole lot of fluffy team building. It wasn't a whole lot of...
Well, we built some...
We did. We had some good icebreakers that she facilitated. But I wouldn't say it was something that I drove all this way just to have some fluffy questions. It was very much every single minute was planned and productive and collaborative. I also appreciate, too, with the exception of very few conversations, the fact that you could have elected leadership, senior leadership on the staff, and then staff directors being able to collaborate within a conversation, because you have folks like us who have direct correspondence with the public, and then you have staff who have direct correspondence with those who are executing, and being able to collaborate on that level is extremely helpful.
So, and with that, and I'm not sure everyone realizes, staff had about 10 days to prepare everything they did for us.
It was a showstopper.
No. If
people missed it, that was a good one.
Changing the model was a directive they were given, and I thought they did a tremendous job. They knew their stuff. I felt they were very comfortable at one point. If they didn't have an answer, they were not going to give us fluff. Like you kind of said, they weren't going to give us fluff. They weren't going to answer questions just to say I could answer a question. They weren't there to perform per se. They were doing their job. What did you think about the concept of when they talked about, their accomplishments, but then their priorities for 2026, and that model we set up of, so council members, what do you think of their priorities? What do you like? What did you not like? And then we went back to staff and says, now what do you think of council members' priorities?
So I think this was the first year from my experience that instead of doing a top-down approach to goals and priorities, instead it was built up from the organization based off of, again, they're the ones who are in the thick of it within their departments. They're the ones who understand the day-to-day operations, the functions, the priorities, the spending. Instead of us from the top down with this 30,000-foot view and our rose-colored glasses view of I know how we're going to serve the city, make it work. And then instead of having staff, I don't know how we're going to make this work, or that's diluted. That's not what instead it was very much from the bottom up. And I mean that from they collaborated with their teams, with people who are going to be executing these tasks, but also understanding where those gaps and those needs are. And being able to flag for us, I mean, that was something that I really appreciated was having, I wouldn't say they were difficult conversations, but they were blunt conversations. Nothing was sugar-coated. It was very much, this is the state of what we're looking at, and you're going to have to make some difficult decisions come up this year. But it gave us a heads up so that we could balance our priorities and be able to balance priorities on behalf of residents and businesses within the city of Roswell. That's what we're here to do. So I think that was really just a different approach. Is instead of it being an edict from top down, it was being able to be more collaborative in that approach.
And what I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, again, I had not been at any of the city retreats, what I saw was that people who may have different perspectives on things of what the solution should be were really willing to start to talk to each other and say, we can create win-win. We're going to have to compromise on some things, work it out. We know that the center of our focus would be our citizens, but to solve these issues or moving forward, and I thought the staff, did you find the staff were
they're honest.
Well, very honest, but very involved in helping to giving some good concepts of some possible solutions. They weren't the ones saying they didn't say, well, this is what you will do, but I didn't hear any counsel, or I don't think I said, this is what you will do. It was this, let's talk about it. Here are the real things. And some things we just can't solve right this minute. We need more information. And to me, they seem very willing to get us that information.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's part of being able to build that trust and that confidence and that rapport with staff, but also among elected officials, is being able to have these honest conversations and being able to work together, not only to prioritize and set goals, but also you have some staff members have been here for like 30 years. And it's, I know you think this is a novel idea. So-and-so thought of this in 1998, and this is why it didn't work. Or I hear you in terms of that's a priority on an issue, but just be aware that these are some of the hindrances or some of the obstacles you'll have to overcome. It gives us a more well-rounded approach. And it can be really myopic to be able to make these decisions from the top down when we're very arm's length from doing the work. We're very close to the people. We're close to residents. We're close to businesses. We are able to, I guess, relate and empathize with folks in the community. But it's very different when you're trying to execute that solution. And so being able to collaborate on that, I think, was really helpful.
So it does sound like you heard some things that maybe have caused you to think a little differently and more broadly moving forward also.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, that's really the sign of a leader, is being able to adjust your approach or adjust your views based off of new information, new data coming to light, or just being able to involve more people on their opinions and have a more well-rounded view. I don't think anybody elected us as individuals because of any sort of skill set that we brought to the table. They elected us because they trusted us to represent their views when it came to decision making, even when those decisions are tough.
Yeah.
And I think in that situation, we were able to have those conversations that would facilitate that ultimately.
So again, and you talked a lot about, I think we both agree, the city staff, the team members put a lot of time and effort and thought into the preparations and then moving forward some ideas. But again, as from your perspective as the Mayor Pro Tem, what would you want staff to know about how their input is going to be used and valued?
Again, I can only imagine how they look at elected officials. I mean, it's imagine being, if you're somebody who's listening to this and you don't work in a government role, imagine your CEO and your board changing every 2 to 4 years entirely sometimes, and directions entirely changing. I do think the role that staff plays with us is making sure that we make informed decisions. It's not anything nefarious. It's not that, you have some staff member that's waggling their fingers and thinking to themselves, I finally got power culminated in this public role. Instead, it's ultimately trying to come to a decision collaboratively across a group that you're trying to maximize the benefits for the community. And to your point, there's going to be trade-offs, unfortunately, sometimes. Whenever you collaborate, there's going to have to be some sort of compromise. And I think with staff, it's able to give us that level of informed decisions. There was nothing that I think that was discussed at the retreat, anywhere from economic development plans and works in process to decisions ultimately about parking or decisions about public safety locations. None of those are made in a vacuum, and none of them are made without significant data. And what I mean by decisions, it's not staff necessarily guiding those decisions. It's staff saying, this is the word problem. I need you to solve for it. But this is what you got. This is what we're working with. It's not ideal because that's life, right? You have trade-offs in those situations. And I think us as public officials are always having to balance, that very tenuous way of balancing between budget and what people really want and what the conditions are within that environment. We're never going to get the perfect hand dealt to us, right?
Well, and I would also say it's not only that you have to balance that, you also have to balance, as you said, find a company that a decision made by what I would call this 4-year, let's call it a 4-year board, is going to have lasting effects on the lives for minimum the next 20, 30, 40 years out, decades out. That's in a lot of companies, if the board changes, you can change, you can adjust quicker than you can in government and service.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, that's also why I don't really like the corporatization of government entities either, because when you think of a company that's providing a service or a product, you can always pivot and get new or different clients or new or different people who are purchasing your product. We have residents. These are people's livelihoods.
Or a new product.
Right. There's no new product. We got it. These are residents' livelihoods. These are businesses' life savings. These are people's lives that are on the line that we represent. And so it's not something that I know, I personally, I don't think you either. It's not a flip decision by any means that we make. But I think that role that staff plays for us is making sure that they're informed decisions. I'm very much somebody who is, bless anyone who's watched a council meeting, asked 9,000 questions, but I like to make as informed a decision as possible to mitigate risk. Because when I put my name next to a vote, I don't want it, 10 years from now or 10 minutes from now, be like, wait, what?
No,
These were the conditions.
I think it's again, having been in a slightly different elected position, making a vote again on anything I never took it lightly.
Yeah.
But you do have to live with that vote yourself personally, and that's just a fact of life. And to understand why you're doing that. Why would I do that this way? Why am I voting this way or that way?
Right.
And that's fine as long as, to me, we've thought it through thing. And I like to say we're in the business of government. And I think that's a different perspective. And it does, we have to be efficient. We have to be effective. We're here to serve the people of Roswell. That's my perspective. But so before we wrap up, last question, what excites you most about the work ahead that was shared and what's ahead of us? And as we move forward with especially with the goals discussed at the retreat and where we're going to finalize on the 13th.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about the fact that we have a better sense of direction now. Just from my personal perspective over the last few years, there's a quote, and I'm terrible at quotes. For someone who talks as much as I do, terrible at names and I'm terrible at quotes. But it's, you can't manage what you can't measure.
Right.
And I think that was something that we were missing for a really long time in this city, was that ability to measure and set those benchmarks and expectations and be able to project them in a way that what's realistic for the near future and the far future. To your point, we make decisions that could have decades of impact. And in this situation, being able to hear staff give us reasonable expectations, also a really vivid view of where we currently sit, and the possibilities for Roswell moving forward, I think, are truly endless. I think we're headed in a great direction, at least with the leadership that we have internally here in the city. I have the full amount of faith in not only our staff, our leaders as a whole, but this elected body too, us being able to work together. And I think that's something the retreat, we were all able to take away from it, whether we had the same political views or the same policy views or what we ran on as a platform. I think at the end of the day, each and every one of these elected officials, staff members, and leaders within the city of Roswell really just want what's best for Roswell. We want a better city. And I think that was something that we were all able to take away from that retreat.
Yeah, and I think to your point, you need to measure it, but also the concept of, it's called continuous process improvement because you're always going to improving things. And that's why you measure it to know where could I tweak it? What do I need to improve? How do we move things forward? Because our conditions will change, no matter what we say. So Thank you so much for your time, Councilwoman Beeson and Mayor Pro Tem Beeson now. So thank you for your time today and for your perspective. And so to our listeners, thank you for joining us today on Inside Roswell. We are all about transparency, trust, and helping you understand the work that is being done for you in your city. Councilmember Beeson, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your perspective. To our listeners, thank you for joining us here at Inside Roswell. We want to be all about trust, transparency, and making sure you understand how your city works and how decisions are being made. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We'll continue the conversations on Roswell next week.